Hey guys, today's Sports Spectrum podcast with Ben Kirby is brought to you by the Sports Spectrum podcast network of shows. For more conversations and stories on the intersection of sports and faith, visit sportspectrum.com.
This is Sports Spectrum, the intersection of sports and faith, where we bring Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the show. I am Jason Romano. This is Sports Spectrum's podcast, the intersection of sports and faith. We like to bring Jesus back into the conversation, and we do that through our website, sportspectrum.com, with the devotionals, podcasts, and articles that are all available for free right there on the website, sportspectrum.com. We also have a magazine, a quarterly magazine that's been going on now for, 36 years. And we love the magazine. The new football edition of the magazine is coming up very soon. And it's really super cheap. It's $18 for an entire year subscription. You also get a digital version of the magazine plus the print copy that's in your hand and gets delivered to your home. But it really is a great resource. And that's really what we look at Sports Spectrum and what we do. We want to be a resource for you to be able to share the gospel with someone else by using sports as sort of that gateway in the middle, that in between that connects people with Jesus through sports. And that's what we do here at Sports Spectrum. And you can subscribe to the magazine as well at the website, sportspectrum.com. And again, it's $18 for an entire year subscription, super cheap, right there at the website, sportspectrum.com. We got a great conversation today, really one that I've been wanting to have for a while with a guy named Ben Kirby. Ben is the author and creator of Preachers and Sneakers. I say creator because Preachers and Sneakers actually was birthed as an Instagram page back in 2019. The page is now currently grown to over 270,000 followers. Ben's work has been featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, Buzzfeed, and followed by many influential people in the celebrity world, in the music world, in the movie world, and even in the sports world. Ben decided to then launch a podcast, Preachers and Sneakers, and now he has a book aptly titled Preachers and Sneakers, Authenticity in an Age of For-Profit Faith and Wannabe Celebrities. Now, this is an interesting topic here that we're going to dive into because it's an experiment, if you will, that Ben is showcasing photos. This is his Instagram page of photos of famous religious leaders wearing insanely expensive sneakers and clothing. Now, initially, he wasn't looking to build this giant platform. He was just looking to kind of bring awareness to something that he thought might have been an issue, which was the optics of some of the well-known pastors that are out there and the clothes and the shoes that they're wearing. But this became a little bit of a deeper dive, especially in his new book, which I read just on vacation recently, the whole book, on a conversation of church and wealth and fame. And sports comes into play quite a bit here as well. And I really like Ben. He's a good dude. He loves Jesus. He's just calling out something that maybe some people are afraid to call out. And when you call out things, there are going to be some attacks or some people that are going to disagree. But if you listen to this conversation and you hear Ben's heart, and his heart really is ultimately to decrease in self and increase in Christ, which is John 3:30. I think when you hear that, I think you'll think differently maybe than you might going in to what Preachers and Sneakers is about. And you got to read the book too. The book's really good, but you're going to love this conversation. Ben Kirby, Preachers and Sneakers. He joins us today on Sports Spectrum. Hey, Ben, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me. I appreciate you giving me some time.
Absolutely. This will be fun to have this conversation. I've watched and admired, if you will, your creation of this Preachers and Sneakers platform from afar. I read your book on vacation last week, read the whole thing, underlined a bunch of things in it, which is a good sign that I had the highlighter and I was going through it. And I thought you had a lot of really great things to say. The book released back in April. So let's start there. I'm wondering, it's now the summer, late summer. What's the reception been like these past 4 months or so since the book released?
Yeah, we didn't plan on this being like a vacation type read. It's kind of it's not a super comfy read to some people, but the feedback I've gotten a lot is like, "Hey, I just got back from vacation. I read your book on the plane, or I read your book on the beach," and that's a compliment to me because it is some kind of heavier topics about this deep embedded relationship of the church and wealth and fame and all that kind of stuff in the West.
Yeah.
So it's been a compliment to me that people have actually enjoyed reading it and also have gotten something out of it, saying they've underlined stuff. Like I wrote the whole book. I did a lot of research for it, but I'm also not an academic guy, nor am I like a theologian or anything. And so to be able to write a book that resonates with people that are atheists all the way to people that actually know something about the Bible, feels like an honor and feels important to me. And so the response has been, in terms of the feedback I've gotten about the book, has been overwhelming. I'm not selling like TD Jakes numbers of books or anything, but the people that have read it, I think really liked it. And that's all I could have ever asked for.
Well, I read it. I really liked it. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to have you on the show. And I think it's interesting because your podcast, you also have a podcast. You've really kept on brand here, Ben, with a book, an Instagram page, and a podcast, all with the same name. So
all with the same name. I didn't want to spend too much time on ideating.
Well done by you. But I was listening to the podcast recently too, when I was listening to a conversation you had with Sarah Spain, former ESPN colleague of mine, and some others. And I thought, oh, as far as I know, they're not believers, or they're not people who walk openly with a faith in God. And yet you're having these conversations with people. And I have to imagine that stems from a lot of people, when you created Preachers and Sneakers on Instagram, a lot of people who weren't followers of Christ, you even mentioned atheists earlier, taking an interest in this page. But at the same time, you are a follower of Christ, and your goal is not to just out people or humiliate them. It's really to help point people back to Christ. It's an interesting dynamic that you've created.
Yeah, and I didn't realize what was going on at the beginning, but very quickly I realized that a lot of people in a lot of different circles or worldviews cared about this topic. And it's messy because some people have this hurt from previous church experiences. Some people have this immense anger towards how Christians deal with money and fame and all that kind of stuff. And then there's also Christians within the church that think that this is an issue that we need to contend with. And I get to kind of be in the middle and facilitate some of that. It has been one of the most fulfilling things, is to be able to genuinely interact with people that have clearly different worldviews from mine, but we have a shared interest in this topic and can talk about things in a way that isn't technically offensive to one another, but also challenging to another. Like Sarah Spain was interested in the account for one reason, and we became friends over Instagram, and she was kind enough to come on my podcast, and she's very open about what she believes or doesn't believe, and is not trying to sugarcoat anything towards me. But that feels like a genuine conversation where it's like two people that completely from two different worlds can have like a back and forth with some listening and some contribution. And so if I can keep doing that for the rest of my life, that seems like a win.
Well, in some ways, that's kind of what it should be. And I think of the Bible and the scriptures. I think Jesus wasn't just hanging with the people who looked like him and acted like him. I mean, he was with the people who didn't, and had conversations and welcomed people to the table to have those. And I think as followers of Christ, I've been a Christian for about 20 years. I was 27 when I began my journey. I think we can easily get caught up in just wanting to talk to people who agree and look a lot like us and think a lot like us and speak a lot like us. And yes, my inner circle should have people who follow Christ and have the same, I think, like-mindedness, if you will. But man, the conversations need to be had with all of us. And I think social media has, in some ways it hurt that opportunity, because it was only screaming and yelling, especially in the last couple of years. But your page kind of opened that up a little bit, even though I'm sure you had some screaming and yelling from people with your platform as well.
Yeah, there's plenty of screaming and yelling, but it's I want to be the type of person that doesn't shy away from a topic because they're screaming and yelling, because I think that's indicative of some what's the word? Things that have been unattended, issues that have been not tended to.
Yes.
And this topic, money, is such a powerful, emotion-driven topic that most people have an opinion about, and so it gets people talking, regardless of your worldview. And I've just been trying to facilitate the conversation as best I can. And depending on who you talk to, some people don't like the method or the medium that I went about doing this. I kind of backed into it too, because like if you read the book, you know that I didn't intend to start this big conversation about the church's relationship to wealth and fame. Yeah. But my goal ever since then has been trying to facilitate that conversation for people that didn't know how to have it, or didn't have language for it, or just were burying their head in the sand, to this idea that, hey, maybe we care way too much about money and appearance in our platforms in church, because it is uncomfortable. It's imperfect. It's offensive. It causes people to get angry at each other, but it seems important.
For those listening, Ben Kirby's our guest. We're going to talk sports in a minute. I promise you, there's a really good area in the book that has some really great stories that we'll talk about. I think it's interesting. We've had some of those pastors on, if you will, even some that you've named in your book on the show. And I've had to catch myself, because I would say something like, I'm a big fan of yours. And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm talking to a guy who's a preacher, who's pastoring and leading a church and talking about Jesus. I have to be really mindful. And I usually say I'm very fond of your work. Like I'll catch myself and say, I enjoy your work, or whatever that is, because they've probably written books or whatever they speak. But that's a weird dynamic too, right? And because that's kind of where you're getting at, is pastors whose platform increases so large that they become famous, and yet buying into that fame, us as people, we worship people who are famous. And that's not saying just pastors. I'm just saying in general, like as a kid, my hero was Larry Bird and Darryl Strawberry. They are my heroes. I worshiped them to no end as a kid. But it's weird as a pastor, and yet that's really the dynamic that you're wrestling with here in this whole, because I don't think we established this maybe in the beginning for people listening who don't know what Preachers and Sneakers is. That's what the idea of Preachers and Sneakers really is, not just the book, but the whole platform.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how you define the role of a pastor, but or just Christians in general, if you believe like John 3:30, that he must become greater and we must become less, then you have to contend with this idea of who you idolize and who you worship, even if you're not a pastor. Now the role of pastor very specifically is to shepherd people's souls and point people to God. And so having your own celebrity status, your own platform that's basically serving yourself is something that you should wrestle with. It's inevitable. There's an inevitable byproduct of being talented or charismatic or being good at marketing or whatever, where your platform is going to grow bigger than others. My platform has grown. Right. But it's all our responsibility. If you believe that we are to make God's name greater than our own, then it's all on us to die to ourselves and continue to point people to him. Like, sure, we can have our success. We can, my biggest issue is, I think, conducting commerce or conducting publicity by way of God's church, specifically using God's church as a platform or a way to make a bunch of money, make a bunch of fame. When those two things are separated, it's a lot less gross. But once those two things intertwine, it starts to get a little gross, where you have to start asking, like, hey, are we using church literally to make a profit right now? Like, are we using people's tithe dollars to facilitate profit centers? It gets pretty weird once you intertwine those two. And so for people that don't know Preachers and Sneakers, it started out as me just showing the value of megachurch pastors' footwear. And I noticed very early on these guys were wearing $800,000 pair of Yeezys, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And just by putting the picture of the megachurch pastor next to the price tag of the shoes, those two things put together cause, as you can imagine, a lot of people to freak out, because a lot of people didn't know how expensive or how much money some of these shoes were commanding in the marketplace. And so what that eventually turned into was this whole discussion about celebrity pastors, about this church ecosystem of capitalism, basically using church and conferences and worship music, all that, to make a bunch of money. And so from the get-go, I've never been against making money or pastors getting paid or making even a lot of money. Sure. I just question the system by which that, like, it's, what are you doing? Like, are you here to actually worship God, point people to God, or are you here to generate wealth? Because from the outside looking in, it looks like a lot of people are there to generate wealth. And so I'm trying to be the type of person that pokes at that a bit.
And you heard from some of those pastors initially. You wrote about that a little bit in the book, that when they saw this thing blowing up. Because I'll be honest with you, when I saw it, I didn't think this person who had created this account, because you kept your name out of this for a while. It was just the Preachers and Sneakers account
for 2
and
years.
sort of this for a couple of years, and just this anonymous name behind it that nobody knew who it was. I didn't think it was a Christian, if I'm being honest. I was like, oh, this is just somebody from the outside who saw this. And yet I see now, when I read the book, where your heart really lies and the concern that this has kind of grown into. But you heard from a lot of these pastors early on, like, what are you doing, dude? Right?
Yeah. Many people assume the same, because in Christian culture, or at least modern Christian culture now, if you ask questions about a very long established thing that's been accepted as good or status quo or successful, then it's interpreted as an attack. And so just by me putting those two things together without even saying much, people thought I was attacking the fundamental fabric of modern Christianity, when I was like, I don't know, dude, this seems weird. This seems weird that, we're talking about clothes that none of us could ever dream of wearing, much less on a stage preaching about a Jewish carpenter that got murdered on a cross and then raised from the dead. Is no one else thinking that that's weird? And come to find out, plenty of other people thought that was weird. But I understand, if from the outside looking in, or if you have some preconceived notions about it, it is easy to think that, hey, I'm just trying to be a troll, or I was just trying to be a troll, or trying to just be a clout chaser, trying to build my own name off of bashing people. But I mean, from the get-go, I've never really bashed anybody, other than just strongly speaking against the idea of using Jesus for profit in the church context. But yes, I did hear from a lot of pastors. I still hear from pastors every once in a while that were upset or couldn't understand why I would ever point at this thing. And everybody in it, kind of at a micro level, has their own nuanced situation about things being a gift, things being, having a relationship with a sneaker store or whatever, or selling a bazillion books and being so filthy rich that it doesn't even matter to them. But at a macro level, when, from a lot of people that I've heard from over the years, and I agree, from the outside looking in, it looks like church has become just kind of an place for entertainment, comfort, consuming, that kind of thing. And I think I know we're called to a little more than that. And so this is my attempt at getting people to hopefully reevaluate what they're actually idolizing and prioritizing.
Has anybody come to you and said, thank you for this, because this has helped me realize how important optics are when you're up there preaching the gospel, or even on a smaller level, right? At smaller churches, and maybe they do have those. And I'm guilty. I have like one pair of Air Jordan 1s. They're $120. I bought them last year during the pandemic. Guilty as charged.
Great time for shoes.
Perfect time for shoes, because I had nothing else to do and I couldn't go anywhere. And I was watching the Jordan documentary. So I was all influenced. But like, I won't spend more than $50 for sneakers, not because I'm of the optics, just because I'm cheap. But you said it, $1,000 pair of sneakers, like, that's mind blowing to me. But I wonder if people come to you and said, yeah, at least you've helped me rethink a little bit, or the optics have made me kind of at least second guess if I'm going out there, am I making this about me or what I'm wearing versus about what the message is supposed to be?
Yeah, I wish I would have documented every time that somebody said that, because it has to be in the thousands. And some high profile guys have said that to me. Like, I even have an interview at the end of my audiobook. This is kind of a shameless plug, but Judah Smith, who is Justin Bieber's guy, basically told me that he gave away a lot of his clothes because he didn't want his image to detract from the message he was trying to send. And I was like, and he attributed some of that to what I did.
Wow.
And he was I posted about him several times, and he's in this crew of all these guys that I posted about a ton. Yeah. And then a lot of smaller, unknown pastors, people, just churchgoers, have somehow found value in this to say, hey, yeah, you helped me reevaluate the heart behind what I post, or the amount that I give, or the luxury stuff I buy or want to buy, all that kind of stuff, getting people to reevaluate why they're actually buying those things or why they're so mad that somebody has a nice thing on stage, that kind of thing. There's a lot of layers here, but that's another thing that feels super fulfilling, that people, if you're mad about what I do, you're never going to maybe be open to the idea that people can get something positive out of it, but it's happened thousands of times.
Let's take a quick break to tell you again about our Sports Spectrum magazine, available now for just $18 for a 1-year subscription, just $30 for a 2-year subscription. I think it's the best thing that we do here at Sports Spectrum, and you can subscribe right now at sportspectrum.com. It's super easy. You click on the magazine icon at the website, and you're good to go. You can actually get a digital version of the magazine to complement the print version that you will get in the mail when you subscribe to the Sports Spectrum magazine. It is a great resource. I tell people the magazine, it's not your typical magazine that you just pick up and kind of peruse through. This is one that I think is a resource for you as you continue in your ministry. And whether you're a coach or a teacher or a pastor or a leader, wherever you are, whatever influence you have, knowing that you want to share the gospel, maybe use sports as a gateway to share the gospel, the Sports Spectrum magazine is a great resource for you. It might be a great resource for someone else. You can get it for yourself, get it as a gift for someone else, maybe get a bunch and go through it together in a team setting, in a small group setting. But you can subscribe right now at sportspectrum.com. Again, $18 for a 1-year subscription, $30 for a 2-year subscription. Super cheap and available right now to order at sportspectrum.com. Ben Kirby is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, creator of Preachers and Sneakers. That is the name of the new book, forward written by Joel McHale, by the way, Ben. And that's kind of part of this story, right? Like, you've heard from people that you would never have ever thought about hearing from because of this platform. And suddenly Joel McHale is writing the forward to your book. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was very shocking to me that real celebrities were interested in what I was doing. This random dude in Dallas with his iPhone that was basically screenshotting pictures and posting about it. Yeah, Joel's a good friend now, and he played football at UW,
Yes.
and he's very tall and very jacked. My wife and I got to go to his house a couple years ago, which was awesome. But yeah, like Questlove, the drummer for Jimmy Fallon. I mean, he's a ridiculous musician in his own right.
Sure.
Wore one of my hoodies at a red carpet event. You know, all kinds of athletes. I'm trying to think. I mean, Deion Sanders follows my account. Like, I don't, like, why, dude? I don't know why.
Primetime Deion following us. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is awesome. I love the connection with sports too. Your book, you write about the relationship you have with Justin Holiday, the NBA player, whose brother is in the NBA Finals playing with Milwaukee, Drew Holiday. And it's really interesting to kind of see, because I've had a little bit of this, certainly working at ESPN, you get that, being around athletes and celebrities, but getting to not just being around them, but getting to experience their world a little bit. Some of what they get to do that is sort of exclusive to only a certain status or level. And you wrote about how you got to experience that a little bit. Can you share? I know we're giving away a little bit from the book, but I think it's really good for our audience to hear the story from yourself on how that experience was like. I think it had involved a Super Bowl party with Carmelo Anthony, if I remember reading that properly.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So Justin, for a time, lived in my hometown in Louisiana, and we've kept in touch. And his wife, we were in the same Bible studies together through high school, that kind of thing, was a really good friend. And he's the one that actually got me into sneakers. I didn't care about sneakers, but when I was in the Marine Corps, I was on deployment. And for my birthday one summer, Justin had just gotten picked up by the Golden State Warriors. The first year they won the championship. It's 2015.
15, yeah.
And he basically let me pick out a bunch of sneakers that he gifted to me. They were waiting for me when I got back from deployment. And when I saw the sneakers and kind of got into it, I was like, oh, this is a really cool thing. All these different looking sneaks. I'd never given much time to it. But all that to say is he's the one that got me into sneakers and is like one of my best friends, which not many people get to say. And we were friends with him before he was in the NBA, like when he was playing in Kosovo, Bosnia, like all these places in Europe, maybe not Bosnia, but European leagues. We've been friends since then. But he has been very generous to my wife and I. Basically, when he was at the Knicks, we were there over when the Super Bowl was happening, and Melo was on the Knicks at the time and invited all the players to his private Jordan Brand gym in New York City. And me and my wife, Stacy, got to go to this party with Carmelo freaking Anthony and the entire Knicks team and Lala and these just larger than life personalities. And we're just there trying to act like we've been there before when clearly we are the shortest people by 2 feet in the room. And so very cool experience, and getting to your point, getting to see a behind the curtain look into what actually NBA players go through is not many people get to see that. Like, it's a very glamorous thing, but it's like a job to people, and you have your own job issues when you're in the NBA. Like, you make a ton of money, but also you have to deal with a lot of personalities that are vying for your attention and your time and money, and you have to filter out who your actual friends are and who you can trust. And also, like, there's real things like, oh shoot, we've got to go to practice tomorrow when we weren't planning on it, or like all these different scheduling things. You have to pay taxes for every city or every state that you play in.
Yes.
Like, there's all this different paperwork. It's just a crazy thing to experience, and I feel grateful to have a friend that is living that. And yeah, shout out to Drew, his younger brother, who's potentially about to take down the finals at the Bucks, and his even younger brother Aaron is on the Pacers as well. So like, that family is pretty talented.
Yeah, we've written about the Holiday family on sportspectrum.com, and what they do, because they're all followers of Christ too, and have
very outspoken about it.
Yes, they have a desire to use their platform for a bigger purpose, which I really like. But at the same time, that lifestyle is just insane. Whether you're, and there's some guys who are certainly in it for themselves, right? But I don't know, just the things that, and it is different. It's funny because fans will ask me, was it like to meet this person or that person? Not fans, but friends, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
And the fans, I think, of sports teams don't understand. They say, well, they're people just like you and I. And they are. I've met many athletes and know them and are friends with many of them. They are just like you and I, but they're also not just like you and I, because A, they have a talent that is so far beyond anything you and I could probably do in terms of sports. But B, they are living or have the ability to live a lifestyle that is just, for me at least, so far beyond where I could ever live, like owning multiple cars and having millions of dollars that they can. I mean, I remember one athlete that I was talking to, and I didn't say it to him, obviously, Ben, but I went and looked. The internet is a dirty place that way. You can go and look and see what guys make. And I saw one of them, he made like $180 million in his career as an athlete. And I thought,
ridiculous.
What are you going to do with $180 million? And hopefully, and that this person is a believer, so hopefully they're really all about giving it back, right? And using it for kingdom purposes and using it for good. But that's such an insane amount of money that no person ever needs.
Right.
That's what it is in sports. It's crazy.
Yeah, there's guys that seem to get overpaid for maybe what they provide in the sports ecosystem, and then there's guys like, I think Justin is highly underrated,
absolutely,
and underpaid for what he provides, like his consistency, his work ethic, this dude never gets in trouble, is only trying to work. This man, any city, anywhere he is, every single night, he's going to get his shots in, regardless of if he's on the road, if he's at home, if he's on vacation. This man is going to get his 1,000 shots in every single night. If he feels bad, like, these guys, like you said, are the same, but are very different in terms of work ethic. Now, granted, if somebody said, I'm going to pay you $100 million to shoot 1,000 shots every single day for the rest of your life, I'd probably find a way to do it. But these guys did it on the front end without any guarantee that they were going to make money, and he continues to do it. And so I love and respect him a ton, and have learned a lot about his work ethic, because he's, in order to play at that level, you have to be a machine. And he's a machine with a heart and a faith, which is rare to find. But you gotta treat your body like a machine, pretty much. It's crazy. So anyways, I could talk about that all day. Very fun.
It also makes me think about, as a Christian who's an athlete, and that's what we do at Sports Spectrum. Like, we try to highlight the guys who love Jesus and gals who love Jesus and are, in the sports world. And whether it's athletes, coaches, broadcasters, whoever it might be, we try to highlight them, hopefully highlighting them, talking about Christ or pointing to Christ, because that's our ultimate goal, is to point to Jesus. But you can get caught up in that celebrity worship that we're talking about, not just with pastors, but with athletes. And there's sort of a weird dynamic with Christian athletes. I don't know if you've seen this. It's like Jesus, you know what I mean? Like we lift them up because Steph Curry gives praise to God after he hits a three, and we love that. And then we try to tear him down because he might tweet about Black Lives Matter. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on like believers placing athletes who profess faith on this sort of holier than thou platform, and then to tear them down when they mess up.
We as Americans, most people in the modern world love celebrities, love the idea of having a relationship with somebody that is exclusive or talented or impressive.
Tebow was that way. Tim Tebow was that way, right?
Yeah,
but
in the Christian world, we like to prop them up kind of as tools to validate. Look, you can do both. You can be a Christian and also be at the highest level in mainstream culture. But very quickly, it turns into basically trying to use people like, hey, look at the success story. Such and such Kevin Durant went to such and such church in New York City.
Right.
Praise God. Also pretty cool that I got to hang out with KD or whoever.
Right.
Like I have to fight against this too, because it is cool to have a relationship with NBA players and there's a couple times where, we would walk into Madison Square Garden with Justin and people are treating us all like we're celebrities. Like that is intoxicating. Like that idea that
really
people think we're exclusive or awesome. And so we have to be careful with that, because if you actually believe that there's a creator of the universe that is, greater than anything we could ever imagine, we're wasting that energy and adoration on people that are humans and are going to fail us and are terrible gods to, place our faith in. And I think there's a way to appreciate talent, appreciate creativity, people that work hard. I have no problem in honoring people that are really busting it or have been really successful, that kind of thing. But to use them as like a ministry tool feels a little gross. Or like if they're trying to do ministry, that's great. But when we're so quick to, the easiest thing to point to is when Kanye was
oh my gosh,
became outspoken about his faith. You saw this slew of Instagram pastors, what I call, all taking pictures with Kanye, basically saying, so happy, so proud of blah de blah. Here's my little relationship with Kanye. And it's sad to see, because it looks like they're using him as a tool to say, look, we're, I can't judge motive or hearts, but what it looks like is basically saying, look, you can do it. We converted one of the biggest celebrities ever. Christianity can be cool. It can be cool to the tastemakers in culture, that kind of thing. And, there's just, I'm not a theologian, but everything I know about Christianity and the Bible does not lend itself to being attractive to mainstream culture. Like if you're true about, or if you're honest about what it means to follow Jesus fully, it is not as cushy and cool as we make it seem when we're just posting about celebrity Christians.
It's really hard. It's such a hard dynamic, because so many athletes that I know want to just love Jesus and they're grateful for their platform and do really well. And they aren't asking for celebrity or fame. But when you play sports, or if you're, a musician or even a pastor of a church of 50,000 people, it kind of just comes automatically. And I've seen a few that handle it really well, but a lot that struggle with it. I think it's just, I got to imagine even for you, Ben, a little bit on a smaller level, we'll say, once this sort of Instagram fame came to you with Preachers and Sneakers, you probably wrestled with this too.
Yeah. I'm an Enneagram 3. I like entertaining people. I like the idea that people think that I'm funny or doing something different or creative, that kind of thing. Yeah. And so this I have to be very careful with, because like having a blue check on Instagram and having people reach out to me, treating me like I'm something special, feels really good. And I could easily buy into it. I could ask for the green rooms. I could ask for much more, like a much better treatment than I get already. And it is my own responsibility to not put too much weight into that, and also try to get people to not treat me that way. Because, when you do this when you're being invited to the biggest events in the world, the biggest churches in the world, you have 1 million followers, people are saying that you're a leader of the faith, a hero of the faith, that kind of thing. Why wouldn't that go to your head? Like, why wouldn't you love having that treatment over and over and over? And sure, like, you would hope that everybody could handle that with grace and humility and be able to compartmentalize it with everything else in their life. But dude, how many times can we see fame and money ruin a guy or a girl to the point where it's like, this feels like insanity, where we're building people up to the point where they can't win. We talked about tearing people down for being about Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
That's indicative of us putting too much weight into what we want out of our celebrities anyway.
Right.
Like, if you're getting angry so much that a celebrity would voice their opinion about something, it's like, you need to do a little soul searching about why do you care that much? Like, sure, you should care about your own, I think you should care about your own issues convictions. Yes, that's the best word. Convictions. But when a celebrity that you don't know far away can evoke something in you, like even a pastor wearing nice shoes, can evoke something in you without doing anything, that's your problem, and you need to evaluate that. And I kind of went on a rant.
I think it's really interesting too, because I've seen it on a even smaller level than yours, but there's still a level where it's like people look at you and treat you a certain way because of this.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to get caught up in that, but it also is really easy to see who is the person who is there for you, checking in on you without asking anything from you.
Yeah.
And when you're at a certain level, I'm guessing you've experienced this even more than I have. When you have either books that you've written or a podcast that you host or a platform that you have, usually the people that are reaching out, and I have to be mindful of this too, are saying, hey, it's great, you're doing this, you're that. Can you help me with this? Can you check on this with me? Can you give me this person's number? It's like, whoa, all they want is they want to take because of your platform, because maybe they follow you and you follow them on Twitter or something. It's just,
you understand why that happens, but it is very evident when, like, I can very easily tell when people are just trying to use me. When you haven't heard from people in years, Drake says no new friends. Like, it's very hard to have new friends when you have any kind of notoriety, just because there's that additional element where that they know that you have access to people or resources or whatever that you didn't have previously. And, good on you for shooting your shot every once in a while or whatever. But I think to what you're asking earlier about, my own fame that I've experienced, I have experienced some of that. And I'm grateful. Like, I'm grateful to have a platform. I'm grateful to have a book deal and hopefully be able to influence people to question some of these things. But the topic is self-indicting, where if I'm going to comment on it, I also have to audit all of those things within myself. And I'm not immune to it. Like, I'm not, fame feels good and notoriety feels good. Having follower growth and a blue check feels good. So hear me say this. But I also think that along with myself, we all need to fight against how good that feels. And if you aren't even considering it, you should. And because it's part of the Christian life is to make God's name greater and yours less. Like, sure, there's an inevitable byproduct of doing good things in the world or being creative, all that kind of stuff. But also, you don't have to just let it all happen or just like take all of it at face value and say, look, I deserve this. I earned this, blah, blah, blah.
That's actually the verse that our sort of media ministry of Sports Spectrum stands on, is John 3:30. We use the increase version where it says he must increase, we must decrease. Yeah. It's the increase in Christ and decrease of self. And we talk to and work with a lot of athletes. And when they hear that, it's hard because they are so placed on a pulpit or, placed on some sort of large platform because of them. Mm-hmm. And yet that's the battle and the push-pull that we all have, is to see ourselves decrease and to see the Lord increase. I want to ask you real quick as we wind down, how did the book deal come together? Like, were you seeking out a book and to write a book when you saw the platform grow, or were you, because that's kind of, and you even wrote, like, there's a little bit of hypocritical side to this because you're telling people to kind of, slow down a little bit, and yet your platform's increasing and you're getting this opportunity to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I didn't want to write a book. I didn't think there was a book. I didn't think there was a book here. But I talked with some smart people that helped me kind of flesh some of the ideas out and said, "Oh, there's a lot more here than the sneakers."
Yes.
And since the beginning, I haven't had a problem with books in general or people being compensated or like producing, like conducting commerce.
Right.
I have had a problem with conducting that commerce by way of a church platform because it's funded by sacrificial donations of people that are trying to further the kingdom of God, not the kingdom of some pastor.
Sure.
So the book, I knew I would run up against the very easy things to point out about the irony of me writing a book, but I felt like it was important enough that I would endure that in hopes of getting this on paper. So to get the book, it was about a year in, and I interviewed my now literary agent on the podcast, Jonathan Merritt, and he really helped me in a lot of ways to flesh out the proposal and shop it around and everything. And Thomas Nelson, W, felt really strongly about what I was trying to do. And so within like a month or two of shopping the pitch, we got a deal, and I wrote the book from February of 20 to May or June of 20 while I was finishing up my MBA. So it was I have no background in literature or writing, had no desire to do that, but felt like I almost had to, because God was like, all right, I'm literally putting all this in front of your face. All this crazy stuff that shouldn't be a thing is still a thing, and it's causing all this ruckus. When are you going to actually be diligent with the platform I'm giving you? And so that was my attempt at trying to say, hey, here are all my thoughts, all the research from smarter people, and here are all the questions that God has put on my heart for whatever reason that may not be on your heart. But if you read the book, hopefully maybe you can wrestle with some of these things too. So, for people that out there that think I'm a hypocrite for writing the book, you'll be happy to know that I've made $0 off of selling this book. So you're welcome.
Well, I can second that as a guy who wrote 2 books and never really made hardly any money off it too. I completely understand.
There's a lot of books. There's a lot of books out there, so it's pretty hard to.
It is
have any kind of life-changing money.
That vacation that I read your book last week, we went to this sort of a small place called the Book Barn, which is a bunch of like used books from 60s, 70s, 80s, and they're like $1 or $2. And I'm just walking through, and there was a moment, maybe you've had this too when you were in bookstores recently, where you kind of look at them and you're like, I know what it takes to write one of them. And there are hundreds of thousands of books here that are being sold for pennies on what it cost and the effort that they put in to write those books.
Potentially like someone's life's work for $1.99 in a bargain bin. And those books are coming out every month.
Right.
For all of eternity. So to stand out, and, you have to kind of there has to be a little luck. You have to have a little bit of notoriety, or have, Oprah give you a shout out to make any money.
Yes.
I think, do you know Emmanuel Acho?
Yeah, I was going to say shout out to my friend Emmanuel Acho.
Yeah,
this man, right place, right time. My God,
he's crushing it, and he also deserves it. We have a mutual friend in Austin, and I look up to him a lot because everything he touches turns to proverbial gold, and seems to be getting people to talk about real things, which is very
hard. Yeah, it's very hard to do. Well, Ben, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show, man. Hopefully we'll get you back on. People need to go out and get Preachers and Sneakers, the book. It's really good. I mean, it'll challenge you, but in a good way, I think, especially if you're a follower of Christ that wrestles with celebrity, wrestles with worshiping people, whether it's politics or religion or pastors or even sports. This book will challenge you in a good way, I think, to kind of just, like you said, maybe take an audit on ourselves and where our true allegiances lie. So, Ben, appreciate you, man. Thanks for coming on, and appreciate everything you're doing with the book.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jason.
And many thanks to Ben Kirby, creator of Preachers and Sneakers, for joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I really did. I would love to have Ben back on. And actually, I was thinking about this after we finished recording. How cool would it be to have Ben on with maybe one of these pastors and maybe with an athlete, right? And talk this out. have a little bit of a conversation about celebrity culture and the church and wealth and fame and kind of how do you deal with that, especially from a perspective of being a follower of Christ. So maybe down the road, we can facilitate a conversation with Ben and an athlete and a pastor or someone and have this conversation, which is an important one, I think. And I'm glad we had it today with Ben. And again, get his book, Preachers and Sneakers, Authenticity in an Age of For-Profit Faith and Wannabe Celebrities. It was a really good book. I promise you that. I underlined a lot. I was challenged a little bit, disagreed some, but also really appreciated Ben's heart to ultimately want to point people to Jesus. So thanks to Ben for joining us here today on the show. We also appreciate you as well for tuning in. Thank you. Do us a favor. Let someone know about Sports Spectrum. Tell them about this podcast or about the platform that we have. And again, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, and I'll keep saying it, use us as a resource to tell someone about Jesus. That's all we're trying to do, is provide you with something that maybe allows for a less than awkward conversation. Sports seems to be a good gap bridger, if you will, to talk to people about a bunch of different things. Well, tell them about Sports Spectrum. Maybe share this podcast. Maybe share a podcast of an athlete that they're a fan of that we've had on this show, or a magazine that we have, or an article that's on our website, or even a devotional or another podcast from our podcast network. Tell someone about Sports Spectrum and use it as a resource, hopefully to share the gospel. That's what we're here for, to bring Jesus back into the conversation. Again, make sure you check out our website, sportspectrum.com. You can sign up for our weekly devotional there. Our weekly email newsletter as well is there, and you can sign up for both of those for free right at sportspectrum.com. And then make sure you tune in next time when we have a brand new episode of Sports Spectrum's podcast. My name is Jason Romano. We love you guys. Have a great rest of your day, and please do stay safe.